All right, and we are back with another episode of Lunch with a Lawyer. And today's guests are pretty special because I think this topic we're going to be discussing today pertains to all of our viewers. And I invite everybody that's tuning in to, shoot us their questions. Even once this video is over, you can submit those questions and we'll try to answer them. But I'll try my best with the names. Jack Seigel and Will Krueger, no relation to Freddy Krueger. And they are with Better Together St. Louis. And if you're not familiar with that, in recent times, there's been a big push about merging St. Louis County and St. Louis City. And the two gentlemen that are with me today are with Better Together, who is really, I guess you guys introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Better Together, because I don't want to screw anything up when it comes to the introduction. So Jack, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself and about the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Jack Seigel. I'm a community organizer with Better Together. I grew up in St. Louis, and then I went to college in Atlanta, but I always came back here to work in the summer. And I'm a grad student at WashU in my first year getting my MSW. And working at Better Together. And so a big part of what my job is to go around north, south, east, west and talk about Better Together's proposal about unifying the city and the county. And so I'm really appreciative for the opportunity to come on the show.
And my name is Will Krueger. I'm also a community organizer at Better Together. Basically, what a community organizer does is unite people in the region so that their voice is heard on a particular issue. We're trying to build power every day, and a big component of building power in the community is education. Making sure that people understand the issue, understand how it impacts them directly, and then have the resources, the knowledge, and the power of numbers that they need to have their voices heard. I've been doing that kind of work in politics for about 6 years here in St. Louis with the ACLU on a minimum wage campaign and a voting rights campaign, and in the mayor's office in the city of St. Louis before joining Better Together. I'm super excited about the opportunity to redefine our region. I think it's the best chance for us to move forward and prepare for the 21st century, grow our economy, and create more equitable and fair outcomes for everybody.
Splendid. So let's talk a little bit more about Better Together. So where did the idea come from?
Certainly. So Better Together was founded in 2013 as a research institute, basically to look at the issue of municipal fragmentation. Everybody knows that we have a lot of government here in St. Louis, but we didn't know much beyond that. There weren't a lot of numbers. So Better Together got a handful of people together to study how our government works here, what it does very well, what it does poorly, compare it to other regions, and consider the question of what should we do next.
Sorry to interrupt, but that was before Ferguson, right?
That was before Ferguson.
Okay.
That was about a year before Ferguson.
And it kind of picked up steam with Ferguson, I would assume.
Absolutely.
There was a lot of those issues. Yeah, so go ahead.
So Better Together, actually, Ferguson is a great thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Not a great thing that happened, but it was important for our work because we were already working on the issue of municipal courts. There are 78 municipal courts. Sometimes their incentives are more to create money for the government than to administer justice fairly and serve the public. So we had identified that as an issue, and then Ferguson really made it a national issue. So Better Together worked with a lot of Ferguson protesters on a bill called Senate Bill 5 to try to address that situation. That was unfortunately ultimately unsuccessful.
And Jack, what came out of that research, man?
Well, I think that a couple of things came out of the research. The top line realization is that the government structure we have isn't working and that the population for the region is declining. It's been declining in the city for decades and it declined in the county for the last census, and estimates indicate that it will decline in the next census as well. And the spending is going up. So what Better Together learned from the research is that we're spending more money to deliver the same quality of service to fewer people. And when they looked at the quality of service, it was something that varied wildly in the region depending on where people lived. It's not like people were getting the same thing from their government as someone who lived 10 minutes away or 15 minutes away from them.
Now, is it true when it comes to the city that the city was actually built for about 1 million people, and right now we've got 300,000 people living in the city of St. Louis?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And the implications are important, right? Because if you're built to have a tax base of 1 million people and you're collecting taxes from 300,000 people, there just isn't the revenue to deliver services for people in the city.
Okay. And so what is the outcome? What is the recommendation of that research, though?
Certainly. So after 5 years of study, Better Together heard from thousands and thousands of people in the region that we have an issue in St. Louis where we study our problems a lot and then we don't take a lot of action, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make changes. So they convened a task force of 5 leading residents who looked at all the research again, studied it once more, and talked to thousands more people, and came up with a proposal to reunite the city and county into one metropolitan city of St. Louis. It would have the same boundaries as the city and the county combined, the same population as them combined. It's 1.2 million people. That would make us the 9th largest city. And then some services would be provided at the metro level. So police, courts would be unified and provided at the metro city level, and other services would remain with the municipalities that currently exist. Those are parks and rec, zoning, trash and recycling, and general administration.
When you say municipalities that still exist, because I think it used to be like 90 something municipal courts. Being a lawyer, I've handled some traffic tickets. So there used to be like 90 something municipal courts in the St. Louis area. So does that mean that those municipalities would still remain, except the courts would be on one level and those municipalities would be taking care of the issues that you just mentioned?
Yeah, exactly. So there are 78 municipal courts, but there are 88 municipalities. And those municipalities would become a new thing called a municipal district. So it would still exist with the same boundaries and the same government structure, but it would not have authority over some government services. Mm-hmm. So courts, like you said, would effectively be lifted up to the metro city level, and there would be one municipal court for all of St. Louis to make sure that it's professional, protects defendants' rights, operates with due process, and operates efficiently and effectively for everybody.
And I just want to jump in on the court point really quick, just to say that it's like one municipal court system. That doesn't necessarily mean like one court building. Actually, the proposal talks about like satellite court locations, so there's still like ease of service and quality for people. But what's important is in the status quo right now, some courts operate in a predatory manner, and then the revenue they generate is used to fund local government services. Better Together's analysis indicates that the metro city government is solvent on day one, and it never needs to take any of the money from the municipal court to pay for services. And then that money actually can be like the extra money can go to the public schools, which is where it's supposed to go right now. And that language, go ahead.
That's about $20 million a year that should be going to our public schools that isn't right now and would be fixed under this plan.
That would kind of resolve the issues that my friends at the Our City Defender's Office have been litigating those issues with Jennings and then those predatorial practices that are basically these municipalities are making money off of these small petty fines to fund the government. You're saying this process would eliminate those practices.
Yeah, Arch City wrote a white paper in 2014 about the municipal courts that talks about a lot of the issues. And then one of the studies that Better Together did is also about municipal courts, and they come to very similar conclusions about why the courts operate how they operate. And just to tell the people listening, you can look at all the earlier Better Together studies. They're on the website. It's bettertogetherstl.com, and you can check out the court study, but also the public finance study and the economic development study, and look over the numbers for yourself.
St. Louis would not be the first metro area to attempt something like this. Do we have any examples across the country that have successfully done something like this?
Absolutely. So about 20 regions have consolidated in American history. Wow. Some a long time ago. New Orleans consolidated in like 1880. But the recent ones, the ones that we studied very closely in the task force process and in the research process, are Indianapolis, which consolidated in 1970, Nashville, which consolidated in 1960, and Louisville, which consolidated in 2003.
And what are the results?
The results are overwhelmingly positive. 150 people moved to Nashville every single day. Indianapolis is the largest city in the region, and its mayor at the time, Dick Krueger, who unfortunately just recently died, he told us specifically that consolidation was the reason Indianapolis was able to become a regional powerhouse. And Louisville has had a budget surplus every year since it's consolidated and hasn't raised taxes in 16 years. Here in St. Louis, we've actually raised taxes 120 times in the past 5 years. So there's clearly a difference in what a government is able to do when it's running efficiently, effectively, and equitably.
Basically, you're saying get rid of these bureaucracies and all these layers of government that are in the area right now, and that's just going to make everything smooth sailing.
Yeah, I mean, the layers of government, they make like doing business complicated, but they also force the different entities to compete against each other. So we can't look at like what other cities are doing and try to compete with like Nashville or Kansas City when the municipalities are too busy competing against each other, or the city is too busy competing against the county. And that really has a huge impact on economic growth in St. Louis. We don't really grow the pie for people that live here. We just kind of push the crumbs around across different municipal lines and call it growth. We think that's a big problem.
And think about how those bureaucracies are complicated for people who are coming to the region for the first time. particularly when we think about immigrants. We spoke to immigrants who told us it was really, really hard to figure out the business system, how to start a business, how to get the right licenses, particularly because they couldn't ask their friends because they lived in a different city, right? Like if you just happen to live a mile away, you might cross 2 or even 3 municipal boundaries, and they have completely different municipal business license systems, which makes it hard for people to start the businesses that are the core of their communities.
And I'm gonna have to second that. I agree with that assessment. And I am familiar with, is it Focus St. Louis that is trying to bring in immigrants to the St. Louis area, because studies have shown that immigrants actually benefit the area economically because of economic development and all that stuff. But the reason I'm going to second that is I've had people tell me like, okay, so if I want to open up a business, I just go downtown to the city hall, and I'm like, well, that depends.
Right.
Where do you live? What do you want to do? Stuff like that. And I tell them, well, you actually got to go to Clayton. They're like, what do you mean Clayton? Why do I have to go to Clayton? And then and then if you live in one of these other municipalities, Brentwood, Manchester, you may have to end up going to their city hall and get some specific licensing as well. And you're correct about that. It does complicate things a little bit. But along those lines, and these are the questions that people have. A lot of Bosnian Americans, when we first moved to the United States, we stayed in the South City area, Eagle Mill. Lower cost of living, according to stories that, and according to my personal observation, that area was beautified by the Bosnian
100%.
community. And then they got a bit more economically stable. So guess what happened? They moved further south towards the county, better school systems,
right.
Lower crime rates, et cetera, et cetera. And now you're telling those people, well, now we're going to unify city where you guys actually moved away from with the county where you're living right now. What's in it for me?
Absolutely. So I think there are a few benefits for everyone in the region, regardless of where they live. And it comes from the work that the task force did when they traveled around and talked to people about what type of government do they want. And one of the big ones was unified public safety. The number one service that people wanted to see consolidated were actually police services. And there are a few reasons for that. In Better Together's work, they engaged a national public policy research organization that specializes in research about police. And they concluded that fragmentation actually makes it more dangerous to be a police officer. There's 12 dispatch centers. Some departments share data with each other, some don't. And what we know about crime is crime travels. It doesn't stop at a municipal line. And we also travel, right? And so one of the core pieces of this proposal is that you should be safe no matter where you live or no matter where you sleep or no matter where you travel. And a single, unified, well-resourced professional police department is the way to do that, whether you're at your house or you're downtown or you're out in the county, wherever you are.
Another benefit is that government is enormously expensive here. We pay far too many taxes for the government that we receive, partly because we have extra layers of government. It's been estimated that we spend about $750 million per year extra compared to our peer regions that we don't need to spend. So this plan would deliver savings of up to $4.9 billion by 2032, so 10 years after the full transition. And that's reflected in the plan. On day one, everybody gets a property tax cut, and the earnings tax in the city, which people who work in the city, even if they live in the county, have to pay, that phases out over 10 years, as does the payroll tax for business owners.
And then the third benefit is that leaders can attack regional problems in a way that they can't right now. We talk to people all the time who want to say, like, why can't we expand public transit here? Or why aren't there more like homeless shelter services here? And part of the reason why is there are so many different governments, everyone's sitting at a different table, and there's no one empowered to make decisions for the region, what people need, and like big problems that we all face together, that we don't face in our individual municipalities or in our even neighborhoods. And having a unified government structure that empowers the leaders that we elect to make decisions is going to be a really big step forward for the region.
Mm-hmm. And, I've talked to some friends from the city. I've talked to some friends here from the county. And here's what they're asking me. Well, the way I'm looking at it, this is just going to benefit the city because the city, and this is what they're saying, the city has already bankrupted themselves. They're in trouble. And now they want to come off and siphon money off of the county because there's more people, there's more money involved and all that stuff. How do you address something like that?
Certainly. Well, I think first we need to think about what that attitude is that says that we just need to let the city deal with its own problems and the county deal with its own problems. One thing that we understand is that regions rise and fall together. We see that in places that have gone through bankruptcy. that it actually affects the suburbs as much as it affects the city that declares bankruptcy as well. But I also think we should consider all the benefits that we just outlined about how this is good for the region as a whole and would allow us to address the serious problems that perhaps sometimes are concentrated in the city, but also affect the county every day. People travel in and out of the city and in and out of the county multiple times a day in the course of doing business. And if county residents think that by letting the city continue to fail, it'll benefit the county, I think that's actually a short-sighted understanding of how we work as a region.
And I want to add one point to that, because we also go around and people often say, like, is this a bailout for the city? I don't want to bail out the city. And so we can tell you that, like, no, it's not a bailout. It's not a county bailout of the city. It's not a municipality bailing out another municipality. It's actually structured in the amendment so that all debts stay with the taxpayers that incurred them. So that's city debts, but that's also like municipalities that may be in debts. Debts don't get transferred to other people as a result of the plan.
Okay. So basically you're saying the plan would actually decrease crime in the city and all over the region. And if that's the case, then the way I'm looking at it, I mean, St. Louis has been in national news recently as the #1 crime capital of the nation. Everywhere you go, everybody's talking about that. And, you know, I've been on the mayor's crime task force in the city of St. Louis a little while ago. And basically, and you may know these statistics, that most of the violent crimes actually happen within like a very small portion of the city of St. Louis. Most of those violent crimes are actually committed between, you know, rival gangs, people that know each other, that got beef with each other. Obviously, there are crimes that happen like, hey, you go down to the ball game and then something happens, which, you know, it has happened. It's not as common as the newspapers, I think, would like us to believe. And so what I'm getting at is when the national businesses are looking at St. Louis and they're saying like, wow, there's just so much crime going on there that I'm not moving to that area. I think people nationwide don't realize that there's a city of St. Louis in St. Louis County. Right. When you say St. Louis, a lot of people think, well, St. Louis City and St. Louis County together already, you know. And if you're talking about these crimes, obviously businesses that may have wanted to move to St. Louis County would have said like, nah, just not gonna do it. So you're right, it may affect the county negatively coming from the city, and the plan would address that issue.
Yeah, day one that we consolidate police, those crime numbers more accurately reflect reality. The problem that we have now that you kind of mentioned is that police departments report crime numbers to the FBI based on department jurisdiction. So we're only looking at the crimes in the city compared to the crimes in the county, which makes the city look much more dangerous than it actually is. Mm-hmm. If we look at crime in the region, we're actually about 25th in murders in the country, which is obviously not where we want to be. We want to be last, but it's much, much better than first. And that's the accurate statistic. So day one, we drop off that list from 1st to 25th, which is actually safer than Seattle.
And I think you're absolutely right. Perception matters. It's businesses when they think about coming here. It's tourism. It's students when they're looking at where to go to school. People want to start like small businesses or like tech businesses. Like perception matters for all that stuff. And that's a great day one benefit. And then a single professional, well-resourced police department hopefully drops the crime rate even lower. Over time, we could see ourselves moving even further, down the list up the list of safer cities.
That makes perfect sense. One other issue that's I think big right now is the fact that once this is on the ballot, there's going to be a statewide vote.
Right.
Where does that come from? Why? And how is that fair? Actually,
absolutely. So the statewide vote is the result of a decision made in 1876, long before either of us, you or your listeners, were around. When the city and the county split originally, they split through a constitutional convention. So it's in the Missouri Constitution that the city is separate from the county and that the city is its own county. What that means is you ultimately have to go to the Constitution to change that situation. There is a process in the Constitution called the Board of Freeholders, which would allow for a local vote. But unfortunately, the Board of Freeholders has very specific and not that many powers. It can't, for example, unify police. It can't unify courts. It can't unify economic development exclusively. It also it can't change what's called general law in the Missouri Constitution. So there are certain things that all cities have to do that we would like to change to allow for municipal districts, to allow for this compromise between municipalities. So what I'm trying to say is when the when the task force spoke to residents about what they want from their government, they asked for unified police, unified economic development, more savings, and a compromise on municipalities. And the only way to get the things that people want is by going to a constitutional amendment, and that requires a statewide vote.
And I would just point you and your listeners to an article that was in the Post-Dispatch a little bit after we released the plan in 2019 from Judge Michael Wolf, who used to be on the Missouri Supreme Court and used to be the dean of SLU Law School. And he explains why a constitutional amendment is necessary to make the changes that we need in St. Louis. I think the task force, even when it was doing its work, was on record as saying like a local vote might be preferable. But as they asked people what they wanted to see in the region, it became clear that the problems were deeper than just like a city reentry solution or even like a freeholder solution, which has been, a historically fraught process that over time has, failed again and again to address the divide in the city and the county.
That's another thing about the freeholders is it's been convened about 40 times since 1876. It's only ever achieved its goal once. And one time it actually went all the way to the United States Supreme Court and their plan was invalidated. So that's not a process that I would bet the future of St. Louis on. 1 in 39 odds. That doesn't seem good to me.
That makes perfect sense. Let's see. We are actually 22 after, and I do want to be respectful of you guys' time. So is there anything in particular that you want our listeners to know that we have not addressed during our discussion that they should when it comes to this?
I think the most important thing to remember is that our job is here to talk to you. That we'll come to anywhere at any time to speak to you about answering your questions and seeing how you can get involved. The best way to do that is to email us. My email is will@bettertogetherstl.com. So that's WILL@bettertogetherstl.com. If you send us an email, we'll respond that same day and we'll figure out a way to get you involved, answer any questions that you have, and talk to you about your concerns. We would love to do that.
Yeah, I was going to make the same point. My email is jack@bettertogetherstl.com. It follows the same pattern. We'd love to meet you, hear from you, speak to your, church, your neighborhood association, or your community. And, thank you so much for listening to us today. And thanks for having us.
Really
All right, the
appreciate it.
pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much for being with us today. And you guys have yourself a wonderful and safe rest of the week.